Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all here. Thank you for coming. We have a great guest on this session of the Fireside Chats from Sofia University. This is Lori Glover. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Dorothee Lucci, and I am a lead global faculty and the academic chair for the Global Mental Health Conference that we host every year. And today we are honored to have Lori Glover with us to introduce some very important themes and also her new book. And so she is a visionary leader in the realms of computer science, artificial intelligence, and industry academic collaboration. She is actually the managing director of Global Strategic Alliances at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, CSail. So this is MIT's largest lab with over 1,500 members. And she spearheads global partnerships and alliances, but her responsibilities also encompass corporate and organizational engagement through the CSail Alliance program, research initiatives, visiting industry researcher programs, startups and technology ecosystems, professional development programs, and talent acquisition within CSail. So she was a very busy woman. And beyond her role at CSail, she also serves as an executive director of several pioneering initiatives. And she's committed to fostering interdisciplinary collaborations with roles in different advisory boards. Her expertise also extends to the legal domain, as she holds a JD, Juris Doctor, and has practiced law. She's also an accomplished author, as was mentioned, with her forthcoming book set to be released July 2025. I believe this is the right date.
Yes.
Wonderful. And it is called Innovation Alchemy, Building Strong Industry Engagement Partnerships for Impact and Economic Growth. And really, her thought leadership is recognized globally, as evidenced by her keynote address at the Female Tech Heroes Conference, where she discussed the importance of collaboration between regions like Eindhoven and institutions like MIT to drive innovation. So please join me in welcoming Lori Glover.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to see everyone. So I probably talk a little bit first about what exactly my role is. I say fancy titles aside, what I really am is a matchmaker and translator, because we need to understand the academic side and the industry side in order to come together in collaboration to create those connections that really do foster growth and get innovations out of the lab and into the marketplace that can help people around the world improve their lives and create great economic ecosystems. So that's ultimately what I do. I do have a little bit about my book. I can share a few slides first, and then we can get into conversations.
Yes, that would be fabulous. Thank you, Lori.
I can start with this. Okay. Hold on, let me go from the beginning.
Yes. Oh, it looks beautiful.
That's the new slide. There we go. Okay. So this is the book. It is available for pre-order on Amazon. But the idea is innovation alchemy, and it's a little bit of a lot of things to make this come together and happen successfully. So why this book and why now? Because change is happening at lightning speed. It is the innovations. I work in the AI space. It's literally every week something new is happening. And it's not just AI, it's how businesses interpret how they can use it to improve their processes. It's people worried about their jobs. Are they going to be displaced? Change is happening so quickly. And university research is still the strongest source of new knowledge out there. How do we get these new technologies, processes, discoveries out of the universities and into the commercial marketplace so they can actually improve the way people live and help them? So in my world, I spend a lot of time working with absolutely brilliant, amazing faculty and incredible students, completely game-changing startups with all new technologies that just blow your mind. And also industries that are trying to figure out, how do I get a hold of this? How do I stay competitive? How do I, latch on to the next thing that's going to make sure my company succeeds? And not only my company, but also my workforce. I want the smartest talent. I want to upskill my employees. I want to make sure that we can stay competitive. Everyone wants all of these things, but it doesn't happen without a support structure and a plan to really connect them efficiently in ways that both sides can really benefit from the partnership. So in my book, I talk about the innovation supply chain. It's a kind of concept I think about. And when you look at a traditional supply chain where you've got raw materials at the beginning, in innovation, it's really ideas and knowledge. And you think of like a supplier, it's the university. The manufacturer in the traditional is more the industry academic partnership. Distribution is industry. Academia does not create a product. It needs industry in order to bring that innovations and new ideas and everything out into the commercial marketplace to actually make an impact in the world. And ultimately, in the traditional supply chain, there's the retail and the consumer, but in the innovation, it is consumer and economic impact. So that's one of the themes that runs through the book, is the traditional supply chain and then the innovation supply chain. But it's not the only theme. And if you think back to chemistry class, if anyone took chemistry, I actually loved chemistry when I was in high school and college. But instead of the periodic table of elements you think of in chemistry, and how, again, you can do that alchemy of bring different pieces together to form that economic, ecosystem where you've got a lot of creativity, a lot of growth. It's really bringing people in, creating jobs, creating new companies. It really comes down to innovation elements. And in this case, you can think of this as like a periodic table of innovation elements. The ones that are pink are really the academic side of the house. And it's, of course, universities, research parks, healthcare entities. A lot of research happens in hospitals, economic development. But in the orange and yellow, those are more of your industry players. All of these little innovation elements in the table have a role, and coming together is what really builds that strong economic ecosystem that pulls the innovations out of the universities and into the public to really benefit people. So my book covers 10 steps, and I can go over each one of these just super briefly. So when you think of fundamentals, and this is really understanding where the other side is coming from. This is probably one of the biggest challenges in creating academic and industry partnerships. One of the biggest things, and most of you, from the academic world, sharing. We share. We publish. We want the world to know what's going on, and we want to contribute to the research community. Companies don't generally want to publish. They want to make sure they get to, keep what is confidential, considering to them that they can, for competitive advantage. It is a huge challenge just from the culture of openness and the culture of being protective and closed. Finding ways that both sides can get what they need and create a path forward so both can benefit is a challenge. And that's part of what we talk about in the book, and pathways to actually accomplish that. Speed is another one I highlight frequently, is that companies tend to look at moving extremely quickly, and they want answers 3 months. Research takes time. Universities move slowly, and it doesn't happen all that quickly. And of course, intellectual property, that is probably the biggest one. In the US, we have the Bayh-Dole Act, which means the universities own the intellectual property from federal grants, and we can commercialize it. But from companies, usually when they work with us in sponsored research, most research universities still own the IP. The reason that is because if we were to give it away, we could never continue that research vein. And I love to tell the story about the rise of the invisibles. One of our researchers, 15 years ago at this point, was really trying to work on really, really accurate indoor geolocation. That was what she wanted to do, like literally be able, without wearing any sensors, know exactly where you stood in a spot in the room. So it could see through walls and it accurately put you right in the room. Well, that's great. And there were plenty of companies who wanted that technology at the time. You can think of everything from video games to first responders. But if she had given that up at that time, she would have missed out on the rise in machine learning and artificial intelligence and all that that could bring to it. Ultimately, over the years, that research path continued, and she was able to isolate specific heartbeats and breathing rates at medical grade quality. So in the NICU units, you didn't have to put any sensors on delicate skin of babies. And just through this invisible technology, you could get medical grade quality results of their heart rate and breathing rate. Well, now that she knew she could do heart rate, breathing rate by introducing machine learning features, what else was possible? As the technology in machine learning and artificial intelligence increased, she was able to add more to that. And not only were able to understand heart rate and breathing rate, but also to be able to track that person in the room and detect changes in their gait, the way they walked, if they held on to a piece of furniture or something. Now, mind you, this isn't video, so it's not invasive. It's just little tiny signals bouncing off your body. And just in these little tiny signals, was able to determine if a person was about to fall, if they were having a health crisis. And it actually was able to distinguish a person falling versus a person sitting down versus a person consciously laying down and being able to sleep. All of these things come together, and she turned it into a startup called Emerald, which allows elderly people to stay in their homes and in nursing homes without having to wear anything, but the monitoring will let their caregivers know if there's a problem, if they're experiencing a health crisis, or if they have fallen and there's danger. All of this, there's no video again, it's just little tiny, tiny pings. It's a particular technology called Wi-Fi that she invented. All of those things would never have happened if the IP had been given up after indoor geolocation was the first thing that was done. So it's incredibly important that universities be able to continue their research vein, because you never know what's coming next. So talking about did you have a question?
No, I find that an amazing story, right? It's just sort of really makes it clear that this idea of speeding up research, so that, we, from an industry perspective, we need to meet these deadlines. We have these products that need to be shipped, or we're thinking of putting them together, and there's all this pressure in the system to make the numbers, right? So that if you don't do that correctly in the sense of research, you're missing all of the opportunity, and and you're speeding up into nothingness. So I don't know, my first, I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's exactly what you were talking about. Like, there's a conflict of interest, not just they're not able to see each other's point of view, but maybe they are, but that's a conflict of interest, right? Because one's geared towards immediate profits because they have to.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the other one is results.
Yep. But, keeping that intellectual property, that core, and being able to continue those research veins, things are happening so quickly. And, in the lab, we have things like, we literally have brain controlled robots. They are not going to come to the marketplace anytime soon. They're a good 20 years out. But when you look at the things. I mean, we have a robot apartment where robots cook and make coffee and do all of these things. I mean, they're not commercial ready, but this is a glimpse of what 10 years, 15 years now will look like or could look like. You know, there's still so many challenges that research needs to address, to overcome, to make it safe, to make it, you know, ethical, and, you know, be able to cohabitate with, you know, humanoid robots. But all of these things are, it takes time, you know, and sometimes it takes more time because,
Right.
like with artificial intelligence itself, you know, it's been around since 1959. Think about that. That was the first concept of it. Now, it didn't come into anything great until, you know, about 10 years ago when we really started having it. It's because of the amount of data we had, the fast processing, the cheap storage, like all of these things had to come together in order to really recognize and, you know, and understand that, you know, yeah, we can now have the promise of artificial intelligence. Before we couldn't, because there was too many pieces that needed to advance. So along those lines too, is in your partnership strategy, having really clear goals. Because if someone comes in wanting or stating they want one thing and it's not clear, clearly aligned, I should say, you're not starting off on the right foot. And the book goes into all that. But the important thing is also knowing what you have to work with. And you can't be everything to everybody. And there's a lot to be said for capitalizing on your niche. And I often use the example of turf grass management. That is a very, very specific niche of kind of taking care of grass in, you know, golf courses and parks and things. There's only a few universities in the world that do this and do it really well. If you're a company that needs that, you're not coming to MIT. We don't do it. You know, you need to go to someone who's an expert in that area. So for companies and universities looking to build upon their niche expertise, lean into it. You know, that's what you need to do. So next is I do a whole chapter on stakeholders, which are incredibly important. Entrepreneurial faculty are amazing. They are the faculty that do everything. They, you know, they teach, they advise students, they create companies, they create new technologies. They just are amazing. And for most academics, you know, working with industry doesn't help you with tenure or academic career advancement. So these faculty, they do it despite all that. And they're really an amazing breed. So having them is definitely an important stakeholder in this process. And then the technology transfer. I think we talked about that a little bit with intellectual property. So technology transfer, mostly in the technology licensing office or technology transfer office, is they facilitate not only the patents and things like that, but they also facilitate the startups. That's a huge piece. Every university has different policies on inventors and, you know, what belongs to the university, what belongs to the inventor. But in every case, the inventor can take that technology and create a startup. What we do frequently at CSail at MIT is we're huge contributors to the open source community. And many, many companies that we've spun out were created on top of open source technology. So when you put something in open source, anybody can use it. It's great. It's free for everybody, but you can then build proprietary on top of it. And we have built many, many, many companies on top of our technology that we have released into open source for anybody to use. There is an article, Harvard Business Review. Frank Nagel, I believe, is the faculty who wrote about it, the $9 trillion business that industry takes for granted, because all of this technology is developed and made available for free in open source. And many people don't take advantage of it like they could. And then aligning the business units, of course, research and development, HR on talent, learning and development on upskilling, and professional development programs. All of that's really important to keep businesses moving forward. Is there a question?
Yeah, just that, in terms of technology transfer and the open source,
Mhm.
what I've noticed is that maybe there's an element there also that people don't know what to do with that technology. Like, it's out there, it's open source, right? So unless you have a pretty clear idea of what that does in that open source box, and then take that availability and understand what you could do with it, it becomes this huge repository of stuff, right? That's like sort of in this virtual space. And
Mhm.
it's not like, it's almost like it could be a playground, but it's not because nobody knows how to get in and what the different play structures are, right? They sort of like not labeled. And so people are
And
like, oh, yeah, it's open source. So sure.
yeah, that's fair. And that's one of the things that my department does is we manage a database of open source technologies. We actually have it categorized by what the technology does, what license it's available under, because most of them, like most of it, it's MIT open source license, but sometimes it's Apache, sometimes it's a Berkeley license, whatever. But all of those things, we have a database of that availability. So when some company comes in and talks to us about, oh, we really are struggling with X, and we can understand that, actually, we might have an open source project that does that. And then you can build on it and take things internally and, use it for your own resources, or, spin out a company or a product on it. So open source community is a really amazing, resource for so many, and just improving upon the possibilities.
I wonder if you could maybe do you at some point maybe send it to me, just the where we can find that, the playground.
Most of it's in GitHub, if you're familiar with GitHub.
Yeah.
But again, it's still hard to, still hard to get it. But yeah, but we can, and there's much, there's so many different repositories, different places. But there is all of this technology out there. And I can certainly share the article with you, the Harvard article. It's fascinating that, everyone is, contributing to this. And a lot of companies don't even realize that it's out there, and it could be super helpful.
Yes.
So yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, and it's like one of these, right? It's
Yep.
it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So next I talk about, again, in the 10 steps, it's mapping the connection points. Instead of going into this kind of like, we're going to have this great collaboration, know where your strategic alignments are. And some of the easy ones are talent and data. Most companies need talent, and they seek that from university academic arena. One of the things that all academic, I don't know about how data driven you are in your work, but we never have enough data. And if companies are willing to share their data with us to allow us to prove an algorithm works or something, oh, we are just so happy for that. So those are easy symbiotic things, connecting on talent for one, connecting on data for another. There's also the story of kind of an unlikely pair of Syracuse University and JP Morgan Chase in New York. They came together years ago for the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. There was this pledge to employ veterans, and JP Morgan is one of the companies that really stepped up to form this institute.
Oh.
It's just really interesting that you would think, why Syracuse? JP Morgan is in the heart of New York City, and it's one of the largest financial organizations. Why is this partnership happening? Well, they chose Syracuse because Syracuse actually has a very, very long history with the military. The ROTC actually started I don't even know what ROTC stands for, isn't that terrible? But it was the students, students back in World War I in 1918. They had this super long history of working with and serving veterans and families. And it made the most sense, with their incredible history and their long service record, that's who JP Morgan funded to create the Institute. So again, it's kind of focusing on those niche points. If you've got something that is a strength that may seem odd, that Syracuse is in upstate New York and JP Morgan is in the heart of New York City, why are they coming together for this? But it actually makes a lot of sense because it was what both of them wanted to do. So understanding the possible paths, really understanding what you bring to the table and understanding what the other side brings to the table is just fundamental. And knowing what ingredients you have to work with. I talk about ingredients of being many things on both the industry side and the academic side. I just talked earlier about talent and data. Those are easy, but the lists are super long. But understanding all the different ingredients you have and how to build this is important. And then we go to creating your plan. And your plan is different from other people's plans. What I was able to build in CSail, computer science, artificial intelligence, is very different from what people build in quantum or in logistics or biology. It depends on the ingredients that you have and the resources that you're able to tap into. But make it known that you want to collaborate. That's probably the most important thing because both industry and academia can be incredibly hard to navigate from the outside. And if you don't make those initial connections and let people know you want to collaborate, it makes it even harder. And then here's a part where probably it relates to some of the more people-focused areas. Building a team for success. It really does all come down to people because fundamentally it's about relationships and people build those relationships. So the people that are responsible in the book, one of my contributors, Natasha, calls them boundary spanners. And as I mentioned earlier, I describe myself as a matchmaker and a translator. It's being able to understand both sides and find that common ground and see where you can build a solid foundation. The people are the key to making these things happen. It needs to be done with efficiency. It don't necessarily need an army, but it needs to be somebody's job. So there has to be some accountability because once you set it in motion, if it doesn't actually yield results, yield what you want, it's a waste of effort. And it needs to be someone's job to make sure that the successes are recognized. And if there are challenges, they are corrected. And we talk about executing a plan. It's very, very important to leverage a network. Network can't say enough about how important that is for faculty when they're looking for funding, how to get introduced into companies, to get into a position of making connections for funding. I have a whole chapter on that. Maintaining alignment and focusing on collaboration, not competition. Baking a bigger pie. Because fighting, internally where they're, seeing other units as competition is not healthy. And working together makes a much more solid foundation for a long-term successful engagement. And then, of course, track your successes and learn from mistakes. Celebrate small wins, acknowledge challenges, but really make it sustainable. That is incredibly important. And then finally, innovate. Peter Drucker famously said, innovate or die. Is no difference in industry engagement partnerships. Success never rests on the status quo. Things are changing so quickly. There's always an opportunity to do something different, to expand a collaboration. Things are just I can't stress enough how quickly things are moving today. And then finally, the last part of the book is a toolkit on how to understand, how to think about these partnerships, how to think about ROI, and all of that. So this is kind of my piece, is that the world needs innovations really to help improve the way people live and work. In industry and academia, we need each other now more than ever to positively impact people's lives and build thriving economic centers to benefit everyone. One of my dear friends who passed away in 2019 was Professor Patrick Winston, and he was considered one of the fathers of artificial intelligence. But he used to famously say, "You can do it, and only you can do it, but you can't do it alone." So we really do need one another, each other, to bring these wonderful new innovations to the world to improve the situation. And it is available on Amazon for pre-order, release date July 25. So that is my thank you.
Congratulations. I just think it's awesome. I really do. It's as if you'd pre-planned the moment when you started writing this, because it is so right where it's needed.
Yeah.
Was there anything where you went like, oh my God, eureka or insight, or you were on a walk, or you're like, I have to write a book about what I've been doing, but why? And so how did that come together?
Well, it really came together because I've been doing this for a while, and I really, part of the fun part about my job is again, this goes to support and resources too, is I have the ability to create new methods of engagement, which is really fun to build something instead of the traditional ways of engaging. So that has been inspirational. And here, talking to the different companies about how they get so much value out of different ways that we've established engagement programs is important. But it can't, it can't scale. How does it scale? How do companies be able to then, go to other places and say, this has worked really well, or another university be able to say, I would really like to do this in my niche, and how do we do it? Getting more innovations out of the university and into the marketplace to improve people is really the motivation of it. And it's just, I found myself saying kind of the same thing over and over to the companies, and then other universities and everything reach out to me to how to do this, and I keep saying that over. So I'm like, what, I'll just write a book and put it all down. So
yeah, no, it's so amazing. So then you just said, okay, so it's really also in a way to help yourself, right? It's like, okay, I am repeating this over and over again. Let me just give you a roadmap, and then let's see, here's the roadmap, but that's a structure, right? So that doesn't guarantee now that you're going to have success, right? Because it's the structure. So that's the first step. And then, I mean, there's still plenty of work for you to do, in the sense that pitfall or challenge or question or oops, change, transformation, something is entirely different here. So yeah, so it is providing a certain momentum, right? So you feel that?
it's definitely a process. It's
Right.
not static. And that is really, really important, is it's not just, build it and they will come, because that's not the case. It is we say it's a team sport. So it takes a lot of effort to build, it takes a lot of effort to keep it going. It takes a lot of effort to realize the benefits from it. So yeah, all of those things, it's not static.
Yeah. It's actually allows you to support, it's scaling. I mean, in a way, what you've decided to do is scale what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's beautiful, Lori. So, okay, so I'm going to go into a little bit into the transpersonal. I said I was going to just here and there, right? So
Okay.
our great interest and I want to say also drive is how to bring things together so that more people are able to live a better life. And so in terms of values, we're very much aligned. So we're very whole person, whole systems. And so in you putting out a structure like that, that means you are addressing whole systems, because now this can trickle down into very many different avenues, and people are more informed about it and know what to do. So it's really like you're a problem solver.
Yes, definitely a problem solver. Definitely.
So, the interesting thing in this is that now you're going to get more questions too to solve.
Yes, but that's good, because if people have questions,
Yeah.
they're thinking about how to fix this and how to, get this to really, think again, I keep saying, things out of the lab and into the marketplace. That's the only way to help people. If you don't know something exists, it can't possibly help you, and B, there could be fear and concern. One of the biggest things we see now is artificial intelligence and people worried about their jobs. And it is a huge concern for people. We're trying to do is provide multiple different ways, even like no code solutions. So people who don't have any coding experience, you never have to. You can just talk and tell your system what to do. So you don't have to be scared. Like it's not going to completely replace you. It's going to help you do even better. You don't have to, go and be worried about learning a new skill and not having a job. You're going to be coach, kind of helped into understanding new skills with new tools. That's all AI is. It's a tool.
Yes, I'm with you on that. I think that a lot of people are very, very nervous too. And part of it is, I think, a lack of understanding of what AI really is. So when you say it's a tool, just spend a little bit more time on that. And like a tool, how would you define this tool?
Well, in my opinion, I do think it is a helpful tool. It can take many different forms. I mean, you can think of the things that already it is able to analyze data, quicker than any human possibly can. And what does that mean? Well, we've had great new drug discoveries, new things that have come about, new compounds have been created to help people. It would have taken humans decades to be able to do that. That's super helpful. People are concerned about the ethics of it. How do you deploy it properly? How can you trust it? What is in the black box? Why does it say what it's doing? Things are evolving now. Large language models are becoming smaller, and you're actually able to look and see what's more. Why is the system making that decision? Why that recommendation? There's more transparency in it. And ethically, I say a tool, and I always use the example of a hammer. A hammer is super helpful. You can build a house with it. But unfortunately, it's also could be a weapon to hurt someone. So, it is to the person how they use the tool. But it is going to be part of everyone's life. It's coming into the workforce in all different ways. I have one of the startups that I work with, which I think is really fascinating, and I love the work that they're doing. When you think of school age kids, particularly like middle school, oftentimes there's like one guidance counselor to like 60 or 70 kids. How can one guidance counselor possibly know enough about that child to help them understand, to take the courses they need, whether they want to go to college or a trade or whatever? It's an enormous overload. What this startup does is it uses AI to help the counselor understand the important things, the salient points of the student, but also all the resources in the community that the counselor can pull on to help the student. And it's a tool. It's something that was never available to counselors before.
Right.
So I think it can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, thank you for providing that example. I think that's a really nice one where you can see, it's like working in tandem with this tool. versus doesn't take away the job of the counselor, and it doesn't even take away of the job of 100 counselors, because the equivalency of all that work would probably end up on the desk of the assistant, which then is questionable. Is that really work that you cannot learn much faster if you're sitting and using the AI? So you're still learning for those positions, working themselves up the ladder. So from that perspective and the way you're talking about it, it doesn't take away anything from anyone. So
no, it's
yeah, I think that's important. Shall we attempt a couple of questions here? That we already did the first one that came from the live stream. Let's see, what else is there? What are some of the biggest challenges in integrating self-exploring with wisdom with scientific inquiry? Now, that's a transpersonal question. So self-exploring wisdom just basically means the internal mapping, the internal journey. So we do a lot of self-exploration that's also very much psychologically oriented, but we tend to go beyond all of the personality structure into these transcendent functions. And that's something that Maslow did, and I know you know him. And so at that point in time, when he said, yeah, self-actualization, we get to this point, and then all of a sudden, now what, right? There's nothing almost left for us to do. So how do you live your life? And sort of what you're demonstrating, which I said, you're just a natural in this way, is like you go and you go beyond yourself. You say, what is needed in the world? What is something where I can contribute? Where does it not matter if I am, well rewarded? Yes, but if I'm seen within that pyramid, Maslow's pyramid, now it's beyond that. So in this question here, what are some of the biggest challenges in integrating self-exploring wisdom? So, as that process of really diving into this transcendent function bit with scientific inquiry, and this has been a hot debate in-house, because at some point in time, you have to sometimes choose and say, outside of myself, there's all of this data, and you just started addressing it. And yes, you can never have enough of that data, but then you also need a machine to work through all the data, which is, an absolutely valid point. But now you have internal data. And so you're talking about intuition, you're talking about insights, you're talking about hits where creativity comes into play, where innovation is deeply lodged, right? So a lot of people get their insights when they're in the shower and when they're not doing anything, and they're not sitting there, and they're not using AI, they're not talking to anybody. And all of a sudden they're like, this is what is needed, or this is what I want to do, or this is how the puzzle fits together. And then they walk out and they write it all down, or whatever, talk to their friends or their colleagues. And so there's a tension there, because sometimes it doesn't align, right? So this has been a problem when you do consciousness research and you look at neuroscience, but increasingly they're coming together. So this has been a hot debate, is what do we do when we have certain insights and, are walking down that path of creativity and innovation in that way, and yet the data that is out there, the scientific data, doesn't necessarily back us up. And then there is this gap. So the question is relating to that. What do we do with this gap? Do you have any wisdom you want to share? Because that's a lot of researchers, and it's a lot of innovators or entrepreneurs that land in that space.
So I am not so familiar with the transpersonal part, but what you said about self-actualization and kind of moving beyond that, I think of the entrepreneurial faculty. They are not thinking of themselves. They don't think about, oh, I'm going to get famous, or I'm going to get rich, or anything.
Yeah.
It is the impact. They want to have a positive impact. It's, what can I do to make the world better? Or, could this make the world better? Or they look at a problem and, it just kind of comes to them that, wow, this will solve that. This will help people. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
So you're thinking that to me, it's a drive. And I know that some people would argue with me on the terminology of drive because it's sort of aggressive, but it's that which keeps the motor going, right? So when there's that gap, that discrepancy between scientific data, and now I've had this insight on how I want to do this, or your example at first, of the lady that invented this this technology for measuring movement, right? And how to be with that. There was a sense, I mean, you could feel it in your story as you were recounting it, that where there was a space of like, oh man, what am I doing? Like, is this the right way? That's that gap, right? So what I'm hearing you say is that with that drive of wanting to do something beyond yourself, you just keep going, basically.
Yeah. And with research, I mean, sometimes the answer can't be done that way. But the other really incredible thing is sometimes you set out to find the answer to one thing and you actually discover the answer to something totally different.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. Yes, it's so true because it's not yours to own. So there's many philosophies within transpersonal that would say exactly that. So, you're giving weight to the way of nature. There's it's beyond ourselves, right? So our job is to watch and see and pay close attention. Like, what's the opportunity? What's the movement here? What else could be brought in? So thank you. Right now.
Sure.
Love it. Okay, let's see. How do you see innovation evolving in the next decade? And what role do partnerships play in shaping this future?
Oh, that's a great question. Innovation is coming up, like I keep saying, faster than ever before, on all fronts. And partnerships are critical in bringing these innovations out of the universities to really help people. And artificial intelligence is certainly one. I mean, we've moved kind of on that arc. And this is my world, is AI. We moved from kind of basic artificial intelligence systems, with easy, I would say, kind of easy kind of artificial intelligence too. We've got ChatGPT in that world. And now you've got the embodied intelligence, where you've got three disciplines that really had never worked together before, kind of coming together, where you've got visual computing, you've got artificial intelligence, you've got robotics. And at a point now, we've got these three disciplines that have been around for years, but they didn't really even talk to each other. And now they're all come together and they are like dramatically changing the world of how we can actually have different robotic systems helping us with automation. Everything's about automation and being able to make things safer, faster, all of that. Just a kind of other example, just a story from the lab is, talking about fields that don't really work together. And when they do come together, something really interesting happening. We got a roboticist and a mathematician. And the mathematician works on folding things like origami, smaller and smaller and smaller until you have something. They came together and the roboticist thought, well, now that's interesting, a different approach to robots. What if they could be shape-shifting? What if they could fold and change?
Oh, right.
So we have shape-shifting robots, but the coolest example I like to share is we have this tiny, tiny robot that is smaller than my fingernail that folds up on itself, and it can be encapsulated in ice, and you swallow it, and ice melts, and it unfolds, and it can do stomach surgery, or deliver a drug injection. And the thing that we use it for demonstrating is like removing button batteries. Apparently, unfortunately, a lot of children swallow those things and they get embedded in the stomach lining, and the little robot can go in without doing invasive surgery, take the little button battery out. And the craziest thing is the robot is made out of sausage casing.
Oh my God.
So it can be eliminated through the digestive system without any issues.
Oh my God, that's wild. That is so wild. That is awesome.
So these are some of the crazy innovations when you think of how can you totally set aside like the traditional way of thinking, a big clunky robot or made of metal and everything. Well, what does it have to be? Thinking really outside the box and bringing these innovations, because ultimately the goal is to have non-invasive surgery. How can we do that? And two disciplines come together, you can have really creative things.
Yeah, I think multidisciplinary is the way to go anyways, but it requires what you were bringing up at the beginning, is that you try to understand what the other side is saying or what their viewpoint is without trying to change their mind.
Yes.
And, because their wisdom comes from their insight and their point of view. And if they were to give that up to follow you, you would lose that edge of innovation in one fell swoop. So it serves us all to just not try to convince, but really take in.
Absolutely. And different perspectives are incredibly important. If if we didn't understand the challenges, that industry needs to bring us challenges. If we don't hear what the problems are, we don't know, we don't know they exist. Like, we don't want to convince you that, oh, don't go there, don't do that. Like, no, try that. Oh, that's a really fascinating problem. How are we going to fix that? And it's just really finding a path to work together is far more important than trying to, convince someone of your side or your way of doing it.
Yeah, and that means, really shifting in that approach. And then there you are, you're talking that those are all transcendent functions. The ability to do that and to be relaxed about it and to catch yourself. I mean, we're all humans. Maybe sometimes we slip, right? And that's okay too. I mean, that happens. Okay, here we have another one by Professor Gray. He's asking, what is the prima materia for alchemical innovation? So is it the talent, the people, the principles? So what is the most important thing? What is it? Yeah, but it can't be. So is it because it's alchemical? So it has to bubble. That's why you like went into the chemistry set thing, right? Tell me more. Great question.
So,
Thank you.
great question. Yeah. I mean, I keep going back to like that raw material, those innovative ideas. I mean, the students are like, they come in without, I mean, I'm old, we're older. You think of, you've gone through life, you've gotten some knocks, you don't understand that, you like, I don't want to, I tried, it didn't work. Students don't have any of that, and they see a problem, they just have fascinating new approaches. And that creativity, I would say, is the most important thing. It's creativity on all fronts because it's not being bound by any particular preconceived notion. And that creativity is the absolute fundamental element in innovation.
So really what you're saying is it's the container. So what you give us, that table, that beautiful table, it's all that, you can go out and with your little bowl, right? You're like in your little chemistry lab, you go out with your bowl and you bring all these different elements together to make it bubble up.
Yep.
But the bowl itself would be the prima materia that would hold all of those elements together.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be it. Yeah. Oh,
That creates.
personal.
I don't
Yep.
know that, but yes, you need those different elements to make the raw material, that creativity, something real.
Yes.
And make, like, you need to kind of put all of those little elements in your bowl and mix it up, and all of those chemical interactions make that raw material real and bring it out into the world.
Yeah, where there's a chemical reaction to it. Very
Mhm.
nice. Okay, so Da is asking you, hi Lori, thank you for your presentation. As you introduced, you encourage for a win-win situation and cooperation. I got a question here. How do you balance the tension between the short-term business goals of an enterprise? We addressed some of that, and the long-term research value of academic institutions. Is there anything else you want to say to that?
Um,
That tension?
there is tension, but I think when you step back and this strategically look at how you form these innovation engagement partnerships, no matter which side you're coming from, some of the things you want are short term, but some of the things you want are long term. And from like an industry standpoint, maybe your short term need is some talent, but your long term need is a solution to a particular challenge. And from an academic side, maybe your short term need is some data, and your long term need is some funding to really explore something new. So I try and not look at any one thing as kind of, I guess, black and white. It's like it can have multiple facets. And when you talk to people, when you're trying to build the partnerships, think of the different elements that are important to them and structure it out on a spectrum. It doesn't have to fit all into one bucket.
Yeah, no, I love it. So that basically means you could sit down and do a timeline for your business goals and intentions and where you want to go, where you want to end up. And you do the same thing with your research. And then you see there will be points where it crosses over rather than coming into it. What you're saying is coming into it with a preconceived notion that this has to be like one side has to think this way and the other side has to think that way, is really saying you guys actually don't, but you haven't really mapped it out.
Yeah, so like in the toolkit, I have like one of the worksheets is on intangible and tangible benefits, and it's square, but it also says it's going to be recognized soon or it's going to be recognized at some point in the future. And thinking about educating your workforce, if you they benefit with lots of times when you have engagement partnerships, we give discounts to the companies for professional education and training. So that is a very tangible, very near term benefit. I'm going to get this program for my people and I'm going to save 20%. Okay, that's great. That's something they get a savings early on and they've got a program. But kind of on the longer term, they are going to have employee goodwill. It's going to be recognized down in the future because people get trained. They're going to have a trained, upskilled workforce. That's further down. Because they have to complete the training. So you kind of think about these things as to kind of what's your short-term win versus your longer-term wins and how it comes together to structure the engagement.
Thank you. Oh, that's good. I hope that helped. Da had another one here. When it comes to technology transfer or the incubation of startups, are there any assessment systems that can be referred to? For instance, is there any introduction to this in your book or the toolkit you just mentioned? Or the incubation of startups? Are there any assessment systems? So he wants to know, like, yeah, that's an AI opportunity that can be referred to, right?
Well, an assessment system in terms of, is the startup going to be like successful or what did they?
Yes. Yeah. Looking for data parameters is that would be a great AI system to start to build.
Be amazing. That would be amazing. I mean, but really for a startup, so many things come into play about, its timing, obviously the novel concept that it's working with, but its leadership team, its ability to get funding. There's so many different things that come into, does it scale like quickly and become a unicorn? Does it struggle? There's so many different pieces that come into it. We have a very robust ecosystem at MIT for startups. Everything from mentoring services to the engine. I mean, I do go into that a bit in the book, the different things that we have. And my team, we produce what we call the Tech Hunter's Guide to the MIT Startup Galaxy, a little pun on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's, you know, a 20-page document of all the different resources that are out there. We even partner with Boston University in their School of Law. We have a free legal clinic for students to think about this, because there's so many different things that go into creating a startup. And if you don't get the foundation right, you're not going to be able to even, you know, take VC money or anything else. So there's just so much that goes into it. But boy, it would be really fascinating if there was like a little assessment to determine if someone had done it right and they were like poised for success or not.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it is, it's a great opportunity, Don. Just another, he's one of our PhD students who's doing brilliant research on actually the emotions in making investment decisions, like how and what drives you, and you know, can you go beyond the emotions? So we're back in that, you know, in that transcendent space where you say, okay, I see myself really clearly, but does that enable me to now make these investment decisions without attachment altogether? Is that even possible? So that is his research.
That's a good one. Yeah, the investment decisions, that's a tough one because
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, so this you know, this is a great question, thank you. And to be continued, and yes, you need to get Lori's book and then go through it, and then we can have another discussion. Let's see, here's another one. How can startups, particularly those emerging from university research, navigate the complexities of working with corporate partners and investors?
that's a great question. And there's a lot of complexity there. And, you know, I think they do need a lot of counseling on being savvy. Again, kind of going to the sharing part. A lot of students early on, they don't understand, you know, they're so excited about what they can do. They don't understand when to not share. Corporate VCs, all, you know, they're in business, and there's definitely a learning curve for dealing with corporate and venture capitalists for the startups, for sure. You know, but some startups actually have chosen not to go the VC route. They really, the students are very passionate about what they do, and they don't want to exit. And mostly VCs, all they want is to exit. But the students really want to build a company and are very, very passionate about what they're doing. And one of them that I worked with was on Path AI, which was using artificial intelligence in pathology. And he built a fantastic company. You know, it took him over 10 years to really build it, but you know, he's very, very thoughtful about the investment that he took and how he built the company, because he didn't want to just cash out. He wanted to build a company that made a difference and could really help people. So it just, you know, it depends on the founders, it depends on so many things.
Yeah, because it's so complex. I'm just thinking of all, you know, if we're talking about data, all the variables in there, just in that one thought bubble. Depends how many people you have, where they're from, what is the context, meaning where is the startup taking place, you know, what is it networking into, what is that space doing? And if you're looking, again, like what we do is like look at whole systems. And so if you look at anything like that from a whole systems perspective, I think your first reaction to that question is just overwhelm, because it's so wide. But then you have to bring it back into parameters, and that's really, you know, the brilliancy of Lori's book is like, these are I'm suggesting, or you're bringing out these parameters that help people structure this. And then we'll see. Maybe there's more data after that.
Yeah.
And
Data
then
is
be harnessed, right, to answer maybe those types of questions more succinctly.
Sure.
What emerging industries or trends do you see as prime opportunities for academia industry collaboration in the coming years? So what's the hot spot?
Oh, we've got a few of them. So
Robotics.
robotics, yeah, embodied intelligence or physical AI is huge. Quantum technologies, that's another one. We've made a lot of strides. I mean, we're certainly not close to, having a quantum computer that can really disrupt cryptography or anything. Not yet, but we're moving faster than I thought we would. And another area is, of course, like cybersecurity and cryptography post-quantum work. I mean, these are huge areas that, you know, quantum, quantum, if it works the way everyone thinks it's going to, it will completely like undo RSA encryption technology. RSA is how we bank, shop, do all of that stuff online.
Yep.
So if it blows it up, what are we going to do? So there's a whole group of people working on post-quantum cryptography. There's like graph theory and a whole bunch of things that people are trying to utilize to deal with post-quantum cryptography. But we got to solve the problem because eventually we'll be able to have quantum. And yeah, so there are all these different areas that, and again, you never know where or there are huge research challenges that need to be addressed before we can kind of move forward. And sometimes, you look at, I think of like VHS and beta, how do you know which one to bet on and which one's going to win? And it's a little bit of that. It's like, what do I think is going to happen first? Like, are we going to be able to do this and then solve that problem and move on to the next thing? Or is it really the other one that's going to go forth? So it's, trying to weigh all the different possibilities, but there are so many research challenges that still need to be solved. I mean, driverless vehicles. And I know you have a lot more in California than we certainly do in Massachusetts, but in Massachusetts, they still don't know. The driverless vehicle still has a really hard time with snow and fog. Like there's the systems, we've been trying to look at like ground penetrating radar. So it can locate itself. It doesn't know if it's on the Mass Avenue Bridge or if it's in the middle of Boston Harbor when you've got a snowstorm, but humans know. So, there's still challenges there. We can't just unleash and just go. There's still research challenges, and it's not done yet.
Yeah, there are so many things. What I was like thinking about actually before was the quantum technology piece. In terms of the microchips that they're working on at Google, right, which are really mappings, like brain reconstruction of networks of brains that are then put on a chip so that it can do the non-digital computations because they're no longer digital 0, 1. So that doesn't exist anymore. So now you have multiple scenarios happening at the same time. So I'm just trying to follow you in terms of cybersecurity. Now you are, looking at protecting something like this. And then you'd have to find the underlying source of all possible scenarios, which
Human brain,
that's, yeah, right? I mean, that
we can't. Like there are limits. Like our brains just don't work like that. But
AI.
AI is not. There are limits to artificial intelligence. There are a lot of things it still can't do. So when you get into the quantum, yes, I really have a challenge with quantum, like understanding how it can be in two states at the same time. I don't understand. But quantum theory works. So
No, it is, and it is. I mean, it's truly valid because, okay, so here's another thing from transpersonal. You're moving everything from a place of where you would say duality, so zeros and ones, into a place of non-duality where everything goes, both the duality and the non. And so this is what I mean. But then there is like something that ties all of that together. That's why with the computation they're going to have to. That's the only place that they can go. But it's, I mean, how fun though. That's fun. If you're a nerd, right?
I know, I guess I am nerdy, I guess. But it's fascinating, like the human brain. And we have a lot of folks in brain and cognitive science who really try to understand how humans actually learn. What happens in that learning process. So you're kind of going back to the thinking about embodied intelligence. Josh Tannenbaum does a lot of work with, really observing and trying to understand what is it that has humans learn. And he uses the example of like a 18-month-old child, and it's a thing, a person goes with books and kind of hits a cabinet and steps back and then goes and hits the cabinet again. And what is happening in the child's brain? The child comes, off of his seat where he was sitting at the table and opens the cabinet door and looks at the person like, this is what you need, right? Like what happened in that scenario that the child at 18 months understood that the person was trying to put the books in the cabinet and needed the door open. So how do you translate that learning, whether, observation, processing, like what is happening in the human brain that puts two together and then comes and says, can I help you? And can we duplicate that in a robotic, in a humanoid robot to be able to help us? So it's just a fascinating way of thinking about research and thinking how humans learn and what is happening in our brains to help us put the pieces together, and understanding, action and consequence, and then taking the step of what needs to be done to move to the next step.
Right. And how to stay with a curiosity. I mean, from a psychological perspective, right? There's a certain amount of resiliency that's needed in everything that you've been talking about. I mean, nothing in your book is going to be about, like people just going home and saying, I've had enough, I'm going to quit. Like, no, this is like you wake up the next morning, you get back on there and you go, I'm still curious. I want to figure this out. So I'm going to come back to it until I have it.
Yeah. Curiosity and creativity are fundamental to moving this.
Little bow to like put all the things in. Okay, one more here. During the 0 to 1 stage of innovation research, how can innovators effectively set goals while balancing deep research exploration with identifying industry opportunities? So the external and the internal. I don't know. What do you think?
So I think the hard thing with that question is the setting of a goal. I think a lot of the research is they really don't know what they're going to find at the end. And, a goal could try and be a solution to a challenge, but it could just also be an open-ended exploration to what's next. What would happen if this were possible? And how could I make that possible? Based on my resources, what I have to work with, could I even do that? And I think a lot of the challenges that the researchers take on is they don't have a prescribed goal per se, or prescribed like, I want to do this. Like, think about the Invisibles example. I mean, the goal originally, she wanted to find indoor, very, very accurate indoor geolocation. But she didn't know how it was going to be used or what was going to happen. And she had no idea, with the advances that came on after the fact, that ultimately it would be a tool that would be able to be used for keeping elderly people safe in their homes. I should also tell you that the research hasn't stopped there. They were able to add mental health to it because they were able to determine, normally like training, you train a model and it trained on a person's pattern. So they would go, hypothetically, get their coffee in the morning, they'd sit, they'd check the computer, check the newspaper, and they'd spend 15 minutes at the desk. And then they'd move and they do other things. If there was disruption in the person's normal pattern in the home, and they hypothetically stayed at the kitchen for an hour and a half, and then they moved to the next room and they stayed in the chair, for a longer time, it started to say, is their mental health okay? Is something else happening? Because their vital signs are still good. And it would send an alert about, it may have a mental health issue. And then from this, she's even able to extract specific things from sleep patterns that may actually detect early onset of Parkinson's. So this vein continues to go, and it's, more and more and more as other elements of tools in the system come in to be able to be used, and she integrates them into this vein of research.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an organic process, is what you're saying. And so we talk about that in transpersonal all the time, is the emergent process. It is an emergent organic process. And that's the beauty of it, right? So that's why that bowl is curiosity and creativity, because that's the only way that you can hold all of this. Because otherwise you get the moment, and it's a little quantum-y, because the moment you start collapsing it into one thing only, you've lost the magic.
Yeah. I mean, and like even with Parkinson's, it's it's more, what can I extract, and then try and say, well, what did I learn from that extraction? What does it map to? It doesn't map to anything. Where can we go? But now there's a whole different vein in the Parkinson's aspect. And she also did a whole session on emotional detection. Also from again, the heart rate, the breathing rate, and being able to determine, happy, sad, angry, with, I want to say it was 87% accuracy, even when a person isn't necessarily showing that emotion on their face. How do you read emotion? Emotions are physiological symptoms. So, being able again to extract those pieces and feed it into a machine learning model that can then again highlight just those pieces and actually determine emotion in a situation.
That is like that is the one thing that then would allow to read another person from a somatic perspective, right? So that you take the whole person. So that's our other thing. There's a whole person element is incredibly important, because we're not all like bopping heads. We have the heart, we have the gut, so that's the intuition and the ability to connect to something called the felt sense, which is where your connection to the somatic is. So now if you're able to read this with a pattern, I mean, my first thought is ethics, right? So when we have the power for that, we also have the responsibility of how do we harness all of that knowledge, all of that data that we then end up with, because if we use it for the wrong intentions, that could get not so good.
Absolutely. So, I mean, and like with anything, it could be used for good, it could be used for bad. We just really try and keep things positive and look at all the benefits that can come.
Yeah. It's like there's so many people who are working around ethics guidelines and making, setting that up in the way you're setting up a structure, for collaboration, for working together, bringing more innovation into the room. Then we have that same setup for ethics that's necessary, that is also flexible, right, at the same time. Thank you. All right, last question. I didn't get to all of mine, Lori. Yeah. Hi, you're on the East Coast. Thank you so much for your time and taking the time to be, with us so late. But we were trying to make it so that our people in Asia are able to connect as well. Okay, two more. Let's see. AI is not only reshaping our business models through technology, but also transforming society and interactions among people, especially in terms of trust issues. That's kind of what we were going
Yes, for
towards.
sure.
What are Lori's suggestions for enterprises in establishing AI governance and compliance systems? Governance and compliance are important issues that enterprises need to set up before large scale application of AI. I mean, that's where we were just now. Somebody
Yeah.
needs to do that. Lori can't do it all.
No, but those are huge areas that people are actively working on. And there's so many areas in that. And we do have folks working on AI policy and structures to be able to leverage it efficiently and accurately. And yeah, there's a lot to worry about there.
Yeah, and because it's so organic, again, because things are constantly shifting and changing, it's almost like you could train an AI model on patterns of what is needed versus trying to have a rigidified structure of ethics. And wouldn't that be interesting if we use AI to set up this type of compliance and governance for the AI? All right, last one now. All seriously, last National Psychology Conference organized by Sofia University. Sofia invited one brain compute interface guest to share the BCI industrial information with consciousness used in mindfulness meditation. That's very nice. Yes. Does any new progress or entrepreneurial opportunity in this research just about BCI? So you're talking about reading the brain computer interface with transpersonal psychology, and like, where is there anything else? Would you know of anything that is in the area of mindfulness and brain computer interface? That's the question.
Not off the top of my head, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I mean, we have a whole group of folks working in, brain and cognitive sciences who are looking at all aspects of learning, brain function, yeah, everything. So it very well could be. I
Yeah.
don't know off the top of my head.
No, it's a very specific one. So you might want to, what is your name? Will, you might want to check out Bill Levin's work. He is at Tufts and he is doing really interesting work in the space of biology, emergence, and intelligence that is not unilocal. And so then see how that then brings you into what we were talking about, which is the embodiment piece, so that it's not just about brain waves anymore. So that this brain computer interface, like, dig deeper there, because there's so many things that are happening that involve the whole body. And heart rate variability is another really nice one that you may want to check into. And we have some work that goes on at Sofia there. Michelle Daly is doing something on that, Professor Daly.